Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It is Monday, August 8th, 2016. Pretty sure about that. Double check for me, if you would. 2016, that's what I've got. If the rest of you are on the same, then we're good to go. It's Monday morning. Everything seems to be A-OK, or as I say, 5 by 5 in the radio biz, or maybe not the radio biz, but maybe military radio, but they adopted it into the radio biz, and we're not really in the radio biz per se, but anyway, Justice, as always, at the controls, completely on the other side of the country. Thanks very much for getting up so early. Maybe you're up for the Olympics now. Happy Olympics, everybody. It has started, and I was enjoying the Olympics until I saw Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel on HBO and found out that, I guess I already knew, the International Olympic Committee is, well, if not as corrupt as FIFA is, then corrupt in their own way. What a great gig, though. It's a fantastic idea to get involved in international sports. You're going to live the life forever. It's like being a politician, really, a lifestyle politician. We have a lifestyle politician in the news today, Newt Gingrich. It turns out, perhaps we'll visit with that story later on. Turns out, according to the Huffington Post, has, I guess, announced, I'm just not ever going to pay my 2012 campaign debt, period. Goodbye. Which is really telling in a lot of ways. About a lot of things. We got lots of other news today. We'll round it all up. Greg Dworkin will be with us to do that, of course. As I recall, tomorrow he's not with us, so we'll round up all the news for today and tomorrow. You can bet on it. It probably won't even really make the news in the capital letters sense. What we report until Wednesday anyway. You know how that goes. We always say it's like getting the newspaper a day early, except we all get our stuff from the newspapers. It's an interesting thing, the news cycle. Fed by our hatred for the media, I guess. I see Armando is up in arms this morning over E.J. Dion with a sensible enough sort of approach to posting, or no more or less sensible than any other Washington pundit, but he's upset that it's an entry in the do what I say in order to win / govern, if you watched the exchange between Greg and Armando this morning, which is, sort of a tired trope, I guess. I do begin to wonder, though, as I skimmed the exchange between the two of them and got the sense for what was going on in EJ's column. I haven't read it, and I'm sure Greg will have better things to say about it than I do, like what's in it. Even if he doesn't have praise for it, he'll know what's in it, and I don't yet know what's in it. It's just, I'm wondering whether that's even a useful kind of column this year. I don't know if I necessarily believe that there's anything to do, governing or running, to placate gimmitarians. Hardcore gimmitarians, I don't think, can be brought into the fold. However, I guess a variant of the play is perhaps these are the things that you need to do in order to convince the vast majority of Americans that anybody who's still holding out as not having had their concerns addressed just simply has an invalid set of concerns. They're just mad about the president being a woman or a black guy or a Democrat or somebody they didn't choose or whatever it is. And I guess that's worth doing too. Marginalizing the people who have been able to this point to capitalize on their insatiable discontent is a worthy thing, if only so that you can drag them behind the scenes and dispose of them properly, because we're a democracy. You know how these things go. Anyway, there's the headline Greg is sending me. Elitism won't defeat Trumpism. Of course, elitism is, I guess, the label that you're going to hang on. Well, if you can convince 75% of the population that Trump is garbage, that's a good thing. And it is a good thing. Is it elitism? I don't know. It's an awfully difficult. I mean, in this day and age, I guess you can hang any label on anything. I mean, is marginalizing the guy who sits on gold thrones elitism? I don't know. Well, there's probably content in the article, and it explains itself better than the headlines. This is one of the things that happens with media, as it turns out. If you're allowed to use more than 6 or 8 words, nuance begins to emerge. You have 6 to 8 words to respond. Greg?
I have
2,
more
3,
than 6
4,
words
5,
to say.
6. All right.
Yeah,
Well,
but here's the content. This is the middle of the article. In a timely paper
That's the stuff
that
we
will
want.
be presented at next month's American Political Science Association meeting. All right, that's already elite.
Well, that's garbage, right?
Trump, Brexit, and the Rise of Populism is the title of the article.
Trump,
and there's a link to it.
Brexit?
Brexit, Trump, and the Rise of Populism. You know, trying to link the right-wing rising in Europe and such. Ronald F. Engelhardt of the University of Michigan and Pippa Norris of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government argue that while there's undeniably an economic element in the ascendancy of the extreme right in the West, the key cause is an angry and resentful counter-revolutionary backlash to cultural changes since the 70s. They highlight the role of anti-immigrant attitudes, mistrust of global and national governance, as well as support for authoritarian values. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Voters for the European far right look like Trump backers, the older generation men, less educated, religious, and ethnic majorities. So it's not really about inequality, but they're careful to note that structural changes in the workforce and globalized markets may heighten economic insecurity and sharpen the negative reaction of cultural traditionalists. And then he brings in my representative, who's actually a very smart politician, Elizabeth Esty, and says the sense of disrespect felt by people who have lost work to new machines, technology, and in some cases globalization is palpable. So this gets to a debate that we've been having on the show and in the pages of Daily Kos. You know, when we talked about that article back from Chris Arnott about which is in The Guardian, about that Trump voters need respect. And James Surowiecki said, yeah, but part of the problem is they won't give up their racism.
Yeah. Well,
and there was a nice dialogue back and forth. I mean, it's certainly true. And there was this Alec McGillis review of a book about, poor white, less than college educated voters that hit the Atlantic, and I highlighted that in the pundit roundup on Saturday. Mm-hmm. There's a look at the people who are voting for Trump, trying to figure out why they're voting for Trump. They're not all racist, but racism is part of it. So depending upon what part of that, you know, we joke about that all the time. You know, you get the alt-right, which is, as somebody pointed out, it really ought to control delete. But the alt-right comes on and says neo-Nazi, anti-Semitic, racist stuff.
Right.
And not inclined to feel real sympathetic about that. But that's not the entire group of Trump voters. True. And there are Trump voters who basically are displaced not by immigrants, but by technology, by robots, if you will. I mean, there's a story floating around. I haven't put my finger on it yet, but I saw it go by, about how truck drivers might be replaced by auto-driving trucks.
Yes.
You know, that kind of thing. That's not immigrants. That's not immigration. But you got to be mad at somebody. And so if you go back to who they're traditionally mad at, they can figure it out. And Trump's going to disrupt stuff even if they don't like him. Therefore, we're going to vote for the disruptor, yada, yada. I mean, that's really what all of this is about. So I took it as, look, the issues that this is bringing up is beyond the election. This isn't how you have to win the election. You win the election with the Obama coalition.
All right.
But afterwards, you got to govern. So you got to have something in it for those folks. Otherwise, it just doesn't get better.
All right. Well, we will.
How do you do that? You get a Democratic Congress. You actually pass stuff.
Do you think they'll be happy about that?
They will be once it passes, just like with Obamacare being more popular now than it was at the time that it was being blocked by Republicans.
Is it one of? I mean, I guess my issue
is this fantastic story in the LA Times about what happened in Louisiana. People crying with joy as they were able to actually sign up for health care. 240 some odd thousand of them.
Yeah, the difficulty is there. I can't believe it. I hate Obama. Thank you for the health care.
I hate Democrats, right? But they gave this to me. Well, maybe it'll change minds, you know, and you do scratch your head and you say, I don't get totally, because look what happened in Kentucky. People liked Connect and they voted for Bevin.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know.
No, I don't know.
But that's part of this whole discussion. You know, what is it that Democrats are missing that you can't get their votes?
I don't know. Yelling at people, I think, is what it comes down to.
Well, you know, us yelling at them isn't going to get votes either. So I take a step back and say, look, I'm not going to condemn them. I'm just going to try to convince them, and when that fails, I will outvote them.
That always works. I don't know. I'm not sure what the formula is. I mean, Trump is confusing if you try and figure anything out based on him. I have my worries about how applicable anything is, except...
Well, he's about himself.
Yes.
You know, he's just smart enough to pick on something that seems to be an issue and make it his.
But I mean, in terms of trying to understand what it is that people like about him, it's like, well, I don't know. He says
they don't like anything about him, but he's against people they hate.
Because none of the things, I guess none of the things that he says or does actually are reflected in the things that people say they like about him. Well, he's a man of the people. He's not.
Trump's appeal is attitude. It has nothing to do with policy. That's why it's such a joke
so
for
why
him to
can't
give
we yell at people
a economic paper today that's somehow going to reset the campaign and pivot.
Oh, yeah.
That's ridiculous. You know, people who are telling him to do this are the very people that his voters are rejecting. What are you supposed to do? Give an economic speech and pivot to Paul Ryanism?
Yes, apparently, because...
Well, if you do that, Ryan will vote for him, and then the thousands of people who wanted Trump in the first place won't. You know, he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there.
Well,
his appeal is about attitude and nothing else, because there is nothing else.
Well, they're certainly not. I've watched enough rallies now to know that that's all it is. But it's
attitude plus entertainment. So if you ask, well, you know, what do they see in him? It's got nothing to do with policy. Don't talk about policy. That's not it.
I thought a good part of it was captured by the people, whoever it was that said the Trump fans are people who think that Duck Dynasty is a think tank. That's a good one.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Including the people from Duck Dynasty.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, back to the polls.
The same thing.
This is not selling. Today's morning general election aggregate from Huffington Post has Clinton at 47 and Trump at 39.7. Significant because, you know, he's having trouble reaching anything more than 42. So he's stuck between 39 and 42. That's his ceiling, that's his floor. And it's hard to see how he's going to move up from that by somehow pivoting. Now, the interesting thing is that the reason is Ribbit, which is, of course, the frog that everybody likes to post when they throw Trump stuff around.
Is that the one we're boiling?
47 is due to consolidating the Democratic base.
Okay.
And Trump can't do that with the Republican base because the Republican base is so badly split. So split that there's yet another different person running for president this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the guy from the Brothers McMullen, I think.
Yeah, Evan McMullen.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Mormon, Brigham Young graduate, likely a Mitt guy. And the purpose of running isn't to build a 50-state strategy, Howard Dean style. It's to steal Utah.
Oh. What are they
Utah is a tie state right now.
Yeah.
And if he is able to get on the ballot, which is, I think you can do it by getting petitions like 1,000 signatures. I don't think you need more than that, and you have a week to do it.
They just have to look in a hat.
Mitt Romney's family could do that, right? So you get and supporters alone could do that.
Yeah.
So you have enough people to put him on the ballot, and if he siphons off anything from Trump, he may not win Utah, and Clinton may not win Utah. But you make Trump play defense there and keep him there. And you do the same in Arizona, and you do the same in Georgia, other states that are very close, but Clinton may or may not win. And that frees up resources, not Virginia, not Colorado, which they've already pulled advertising out the Clinton camp has, but put it into Florida, where she's making a swing, and Pennsylvania, of course. Mm-hmm. Ohio, where you got the tacit support of their governor, John Kasich, who hates Trump. And I'm old school. You win those 3 states, of course, and you take it off the map for Trump no matter what he does. So that's the strategy, and that's what's going on.
Oh, well, okay. Good luck. I found it surprising. He is apparently, he was being described in the headlines as well. He's a former CIA person, but he's got
never held office before.
Right, no elective experience. But I would asterisk that. He's, I guess, I'll have to look him up to be certain, but he's like chief of staff of the House Republican Policy Committee.
There's a graphic that Kevin Cruz was sending around. It's right above the piece I put in for you about elitism won't defeat Trump from.
Okay.
And if you look at it, it's very funny. It's not real, but it's a fake Wikipedia free encyclopedia piece.
Yeah.
And it outlines McMullen's qualifications.
Oh.
Right? 3, political service. 3.1, House Committee on Foreign Affairs. 3.2, House Republican Conference. 3.3, public speaking. 3.4, board memberships. 3.5, treasonous membership in Never Trump movement.
Yes.
I knew about 3.5, but I hadn't known about the others, so this was useful.
Yeah. Well,
he's also, in his career, he's been a volunteer refugee resettlement officer, CIA clandestine division. So what he's done in the CIA, you don't know about because he can't talk about.
Right. Yeah.
Also investment banking.
Yeah. Sure. I'm the director of clandestine operations. I'm
the director of stuff that I can't tell you about, so take my word for it. It was really good.
My platform is, now that I've told all of you that I have to kill you, and so I'm going to just I'll start with Republicans, and guess what? I won.
I'll start with, Trump supporters. So, it's interesting.
It is it's interesting that can be contemplated as relevant enough to report in the news. Because of where we are with Trump.
If it gives him a platform for a day or two and it's all anti-Trump stuff, I'm all for it. Yeah. What difference does it make, as a famous candidate once said.
So a guy is,
in a completely different context.
I looked at the picture I saw flying by. Did they shave David French's head and just send him back out there? But he's a different guy. That's interesting. Not only not being a on-office holder at any point, which is fine. But the idea, like I said, it's an asterisk because he's director of the House Republican Policy Committee, so it's hard, and he's not an elected official, but I mean, he exists in that world, certainly. And I mean, wow, that's maybe the blankest resume ever. I can't tell you what I did in the CIA, and to be honest, it's not because of secrecy, but I can't actually tell you anything I did as director of policy for House Republicans either, because we didn't do anything. That guy has been, he's in a no-show job and I was never here job. So, okay.
Well, but didn't Evan McMullen also work for Kathy McMorris, Rogers McMean?
Maybe, yeah.
I think he did. I think he was a staff person on foreign policy. And the interesting thing about that is that McMorris Rogers is her real name, is leadership, and I think she's a pro-Trump person.
MacGyver, rather. Is she? Well, the Republican world is a jumbled mess. I also saw this morning that I guess Jebb's son is
George
endorsing.
P. Bush, who's thinking of running for land commissioner or something. I didn't really check.
Thinking of running for president.
The difference between the Bush clan who isn't running, who won't support Trump, and the clan who is running, who reluctantly has to do stuff, is kind of interesting. But that's a huge bet. That's assuming that when Trump loses, everybody doesn't turn on him.
Yeah. I guess that's a true.
Even for Texas, that's a tough bet to take.
Yeah,
get your uncle and everybody mad at you, and then wind up losing because of it anyway.
Well, that guy has got to be, pretty desperate. This is obviously as a person who has grown up with the idea in mind that, as they often say in fairy tales, as kids do. Well, I would like to be president of the United States someday. If you're George Bush, you start thinking.
He was born with a silver foot in his mouth.
Be president.
That's what I think.
And so it's a play that on the one hand you could say, well, he'll obviously go the other way. On the other hand, you could say this is a desperation move. I don't even know if Trump stuff will stick to anybody or not. But
you could say nothing.
Did Jeb really ruin things for the family biz? So maybe I need to do the best I can, putting an arm's length between us. I don't know how you'll really do that over the long run, but
I just think a bad move overall. So anyway, you got all these new polls that came out. Morning Consult, Clinton plus 9. ABC, Washington Post poll, Clinton plus 7. Yeah. UPI, C-Voter, which is a Republican favoring a poll, Clinton plus 6. IBD Tip, Clinton plus 7. and there's McClatchy, Clinton plus 15. This is going back to the August polls, the ones that at least have August dates on it. NBC Wall Street Journal, Clinton plus 9. None of this is particularly good news for Donald Trump. And then you have the state versions. Arizona came out 44-42 Trump from YouGov CBS, Nevada 43-41 Clinton. Nevada's a very hard place to poll, usually underpolls the Democrats. Virginia, your state, 49-37, not close.
That's right. I fixed it.
Good. That's an important thing.
It's all rigged.
Yep. And so, given that, how did Clinton get that big a margin, double digits in Virginia? Black voters in Virginia, Clinton 92, Trump 1.
I know who the one is.
I didn't know Ben Carson lived in Virginia. College Ed Whites.
That's really basically
Clinton 43, Trump 38.
Okay.
So this college, non-college white thing is the thing for this election. Every election you have things, soccer moms or security dads or whatever. This year it's non-college whites, which started that whole discussion with the elitism versus Trumpism. And I don't necessarily think you have to conflate or mistake what you'd need to do in an election, which is to say work on your base and then take the college-educated whites away from the Republicans. And what you have to do to govern afterwards, which, of course, means that when you're president of everybody.
Oh.
So, that's what's going on here. And, of course, these polls are incredibly helpful to Clinton. Now, here's another thing. Nate Cohn posted, why Trump struggles in Virginia yet holds up surprisingly well in Nevada. And I'm going to I gave you so many things, I'm just going to put this right at the end of the list so it's easy to get to. But it's basically a map of the country by state.
All right.
And it represents white voters with a college degree as a share of Mitt Romney's supporters in 2012.
Okay.
Very educated states, not so educated states.
I see.
Right? And Virginia is way up there.
Yes.
With a very high percentage of college degree voters as a share of Mitt Romney's supporters compared to, let's say, Nevada, which doesn't.
True.
So if the educated voters are going for Clinton and the non-educated voters are going for Trump, a state with educated voters should really do better for her than, let's say, compared to Romney. And you see it in Virginia, you see it in Colorado, you even see it in Georgia.
Yes, if you look closely.
Whereas Nevada, according to the polls, is closer than you'd expect. And that doesn't have a lot of the college-educated to pull from. It's just a state that doesn't have a lot of that.
Yes.
Neither does, by the way, West Virginia.
No. Sorry. You don't.
So, interesting correlation there. And that's Ron Brownstein pointed that out. Months ago, we've talked about it, but that split, he's the first one I remember that brought it to my attention. That doesn't mean he's the first one that saw it, but he's the first one I remember that brought it to my attention, and he's been talking about it ever since. So I think that's one of the big splits there. That one really needs to pay attention to.
All righty.
Right. The press is starting to get pretty tough on Trump. There was a great video. It's a 4-minute, here's what I think kind of piece from Brian Stelter about how Trump is sowing doubt about the legitimacy of the election. Dangerous. Press has a duty to challenge him. It's an awful thing on CNN, on reliable sources this Sunday. And I'll send you the link. I don't know what to do with it, really, because it's hard to play a 4-minute video on the show. But maybe we can put that in the links for the story afterwards. And I think that's kind of important. Here's a good piece. Election update from Harry Enton as of August 7th, which is yesterday afternoon. Election update, Clinton's post-convention bump is holding steady. The odds that 538, and again, every time they have one of these pieces, they explain how come they got their screwy numbers. But right now, the forecast has an 83% chance of Clinton winning. And I find the New York Times version of that, the who will win, really to be the most helpful, because they, in their piece, it's an upshot piece, so it should be free for you, and there's the link, but 83% chance of winning the presidency, but as you scroll down, you can see everybody else's all in the same place. That is to say, odds of winning the presidency, New York Times 83, 538 83, PredictWise 77 as of this morning. Sam Wang's site 85, so now they're all coming in line with Sam, who had this for a long time because he doesn't do polls plus, he just does polls. And Cook Report leaning Dem. Rothenberg Report still has it as a toss-up because they have a lot of toss-up states.
Sure.
And Larry Sabato leaning Dem. So that's where we stand in terms of the election. And again, if Trump is to make a pivot, it's going to be interesting to see how, if I were the media, and I'm not, I would say, you want to talk economics, you want to talk about tax exemptions, and you want to talk about things economic and money, show us your tax returns. Otherwise, it has no meaning.
Yes.
We're not going to report it.
Oh, well, all right.
Show us your tax returns. You owe it to us. Otherwise, you're just making it up. You want to talk about tax exemptions, what does it mean to you? We don't know. We have to see your tax returns. So we'll see how that goes.
I guess we could probably just guess at this point. I mean, and just I can't imagine that any I can't imagine that there's any tax deduction that's out there that he doesn't take. And I would guess that 75% of them are dicey.
He's not even entitled to.
Right.
That's another story.
75% or more probably fall on the wrong side of of questionable, and some of them are just
right. And the other
wrong.
150% are overseas.
Yeah. So. I don't know. Well, okay. It will always be great to see the tax returns, but yeah, I guess I've known since Romney that you're just out of luck. If a candidate says no,
I don't expect to make
to
him do it. I expect him to pay a price for not doing it.
Yes, I guess there's that. I would take that price, and
yep.
I just want to. I don't know. I want to see it exacted definitively. Like, wait, took 5% off of your total at the end. Anyway,
hey, you know who is on the campaign to help McMullen steal Utah?
No, who?
Rick Wilson.
Okay.
The very same Rick Wilson who has this fantastic article in the Daily News. You'll like the title. Beat him like a drum. Donald Trump must not just lose in November to correct the institutions he's broken. He must suffer a humiliating defeat.
I like that.
Well, Rick is doing his part.
Yeah. I guess I have a feeling he submitted that as like a dog. Beat him like a dog, but then everybody was like, well, the animal rights people were going to be angry with you. Okay, drum, right. But the dog is his line.
Right. So, in addition to the insults, which are always fun, he points out Clinton's far ahead in polls that matters. A Friday poll put her up slightly in Georgia, which has been reliable Republican territory in the last 5 elections. That's a long time. Trump's entire path to victory has been predicated on winning white men, particularly less educated white men in droves, yet he is right now underperforming Romney's 2012 showing among whites, men, white evangelicals, whites without a college degree, while hemorrhaging every other demographic. And I think that was Armando's main point, although he could speak for himself, of course, about EJ's article. If you're working with those other demographics, you don't have to get whites without a college education in order to win. And that's true. But governing is a different issue. A growing number of Americans are coming to the realization that Trump is more than just a political train wreck. He's a real threat to the nation, what with the fear of nuclear weapons and the sweeping power of the federal government in his tiny paws. I mean, we've talked about that in terms of the military people, for example, who say you can't let this guy anywhere near the White House. And Wilson says, those of us who believe, who know, that Trump is dangerous can't just settle for him being beaten in November. We need to ensure that he is on the business end of a decisive, humiliating defeat so that the terribly divisive forces he has unleashed are delivered a death blow. Basically, he wants to beat Trump and then salt the ground where Trump came from.
I'm okay with that.
And that's where that Utah thing comes from. So there's that. We have this from the Weekly Standard, Surrender versus Collaboration, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and Donald Trump. And basically how Paul Ryan represents the Vichy Republicans, who after the war and they lose are just going to be completely, totally embarrassed into submission, I suppose. I don't know what happens.
Okay.
But that's kind of an interesting piece there. We have Barry McCaffrey. Remember General McCaffrey, war on drugs guy? He was in the military before that. Donald Trump is an abusive braggart, unfit to lead our armed forces. He has in an opinion article today in the Seattle Times.
Okay.
He doesn't mention Clinton once, but he mentions Trump something like 17 times. So, it's this is in the middle of the so-called pivot.
Who's pivoting now?
Well, everybody says on the Republican side he needs to pivot. Well, he ain't pivoting.
Well, yeah, but
and there's no Etch-a-Sketch, and this is not how it happens.
I was just checking because I was like, are we not finished thinking that there's going to be a pivot for Trump? Who else?
I'm done. I don't
pivot?
think it will be. And then finally here, the USC LA Times poll is the weird panel poll that basically shows it's always a tie. It did have a 7-point bump for Trump in the middle of the convention. That's now gone. Clinton leads by a point. But the more interesting part, I sent you the graphs to look at. They're pretty. Who is the predicted winner? Even though the who is going to win has been very steady for 4 or 5 days with a 1-point Clinton lead, and that tells us a couple of things. Despite the poll's bias, the ground isn't changing. It's not like her 1-point lead is dropping. It's steady for 4 or 5 days. So there's nothing out there, no early warning signs, no coal in the canary in the coal mine, evidence that the Clinton bounce is fading at this point. It's a week later. And if it's written in stone because it's still the same a week from now, that's going to be highly meaningful. Then they have their who do you think is going to win, the question I love, and that's just been growing and growing and growing. In the middle of the Republican convention, it was Clinton 49, Trump 45. Now it's Clinton 55, Trump 41. So that's a 14-point lead now. And that's often a better indicator of what's going to happen down the line.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening out there in the world. I think it's all kind of interesting. Sounds like the Delta Airlines flight has been fixed.
Oh.
There was an outage, and all the Delta planes were grounded. Sounds like they fixed that, and now they're trying to get things back together.
Well, that's good.
And then we have the Olympics. That's, there's no room for any other news. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the Olympics. I watched.
Did you see Simone Biles?
I did. I don't really even like gymnastics a whole lot.
I know, but she's extraordinary.
But yeah, and I mean, you're forced to watch it.
The lady can fly.
It's
it's amazing
all the time. And but by the end of the competition, I say now I remember why I watch it, even though I say I don't like gymnastics. I think I might, in fact, like gymnastics and don't realize it. They do great stuff. I was very interested in a lot of what went on last night and a lot of the specialists, the uneven bars specialists. I just thought that was an interesting job to have.
Yes. All right, last piece of the day. This is from 538. It's Harry Enton writing today. About a third of Bernie Sanders supporters still aren't backing Hillary Clinton.
They're very lazy.
Well, they have their reasons.
Oh, all right then.
But he makes the point that it's such a small number of people at this point that it doesn't really matter.
They're also strategically located, and I suspect that has a lot to do with a lot of
California, for example.
Yes.
The conventions, you could tell that from the delegates during the convention. The conventions did move some Sanders voters to Clinton. In national polls taken right before the conventions, he writes, Clinton was winning around half of Sanders supporters when Gary Johnson and Jill Stein were included. 57% for CNN and Marist. By the way, there's a new Monmouth poll out today at some point.
Okay.
Coming.
All right. Well, we can wait for that. It'll be good stuff. Well, I guess
that'll be for tomorrow or the next day. 57% per CNN and Marist and 44% per YouGov. Now Clinton is at 69% and 65% and 49% in the various polls. Without third-party candidates, Clinton was already doing much better. The convention helped. She moved from 79% up to 91% among Sanders supporters in CNN's polls, 68% to 75% in Marist, 59 to 65% in YouGov. So you can see the R versus D lean in those polls. And the difference is, you read, I know people will casually come across, she's getting 90% of Bernie voters. True, if it's a head-to-head matchup. But if you throw in Jill Stein and Gary Johnson, that number drops, and that's what he's talking about. But the sizable portion of Sanders supporters defecting from Clinton when given other options could still be a problem for the Clinton campaign if the election tightens.
Yes, or if the election is held today, one of the other.
It's a better news for Clinton is that none of this may matter in the end. As I mentioned, getting these wayward Sanders backers on board would only marginally help her. He figures if everybody comes on board, she gains a point. Yeah.
I'd like to see polling, and I guess we could probably get some like this if we talk to public policy polling. I'd be interested. They usually have the leaning questions and pushing people, etc. But yeah, I'd like to know. Ask people particularly in some of those heavily Democratic states, to ask them, okay, so what's your preference? Who are you going to vote for? Who do you want to win? Who do you think is going to win, kind of stuff. But then say, now let me ask you this. If you knew it mattered and your vote would make a difference in the electoral count, who would you vote for?
Right. If it mattered, who would you vote for as opposed to who you're going to vote for?
That'd be an interesting question. Some people would be, angered and insulted by that. Maybe all of them, but that's okay.
I still think they should include the sweet meteor of death, or SMOD 16 as it's known.
Yeah, I've seen some bumper stickers about that one now.
There's a Twitter account.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a Twitter account for everything. Whatever happened to the ones that were for animals that escaped from the zoos?
I
should check in on those.
Anyway, Harry concludes his piece. The better news for Clinton is that none of these may matter in the end. As I mentioned, getting these wayward Sanders backers on board would only marginally help her. And she leads nationally by 6 or 7 percentage points at the moment. She may not need their help. The reason I read that is not to rub it into Sanders people. No. It's just to play a little hardball politics with influence and leverage.
Oh, yeah.
And the point is, you have to use it when you have it. And if you don't use it when you have it, you're going to lose it. So the leverage now is not the same as the leverage it was, for example, prior to the convention.
Yes.
That's just the way things work.
That's true, and it's worth understanding, certainly. Another interpretation of it could be, we say it not to rub it in, but to say, it's going to be okay. You'll be all right. You can do that and not have people terribly angry with you.
Sure.
Maybe.
I mean, as a matter of fact, you could look at it that way and say, hey, listen, if it's head-to-head, she gets 90% anyway. Mm-hmm. And if it's third party, let people vote for whoever they want to. If they want to vote for Stein, if they want to vote for the sweet meteor of death, what difference does it make? Because it really doesn't, according to this. And don't pick on them for doing that.
Yeah. I will point out that under the normal rules, it doesn't make a difference. And it's going to be extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to change any of those normal rules, although I do still caution that when we deal with the very unusual situation of Trump having been defeated but then refusing to concede that the election was fairly contested,
for example.
Yeah, then he's going to start saying...
Or Trumpism and defeating it and beating it down and salting the earth. However you want to do it, there's real good reason to make sure Trump gets the lowest possible vote and his opponent gets the highest.
Yes. That's really... It is actually important. It won't change the electoral vote outcome, but that's for a different kind of election. That's for an election where both sides respect the electoral college.
Right, and again, going back to a famous candidate statement, what difference does it make? This year it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess so. Okay.
Anyway, that's it. That's a Monday summary. At least I think we covered all the bases. The airline outage, the Olympics. We didn't talk about A-Rod retiring. That's okay. And we did a little politics and some polls. So hopefully people enjoyed it. And if not, if you're listening by podcast, you get to skip this segment and go right to David, which I'm sure a lot of people do, and that's okay.
Rewind and listen to it.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. You're right. I won't be here tomorrow, but I'll be back on Wednesday. And look for the Monmouth poll today and whatever else comes out. Right now, Clinton's winning and Trump is losing, and elections are always fun when you win. And they're horrible when you lose, but, that's life.
Yeah. It happens every 4 years with the president.
But this more horrible than most if we lose, because, it really is a big deal. Yeah. Take care, and I'll talk to you Wednesday.
Okay. Thanks very much. We'll see you then. And, I guess if you lose this election, you might not get another shot at it. There's always that. Okay. So we'll take a quick look around here. By the way, I figured out who the 1% of black voters in Virginia who are supporting Trump are. It's E.W. Jackson, who ran for lieutenant governor in Virginia. Last time around, and is a nut. But you may remember that. Okay, let's see. Where are we with our variety of subjects today? Let's see. I don't think I really need to go any deeper into this one, although I will explain why I was chuckling during the discussion of the E.J. Dionne piece, and that is, really being told, well, no, you got to stand pat against elitism by E.J. Dionne is difficult to swallow, at least without a little chuckle. And then, of course, and the reason you need to is because of a paper published by Professor Pippa Norris at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Okay. Are you sure about this? Well, okay. Everybody wants to deflect attention from themselves. Everybody look away. I'm not elite. You are. Now read this paper because I'm from Harvard. It says, don't be an elitist. Okay. Well, I get your point. Although maybe we'll read through the article. There's always something else good to mine from it, and the headline never encapsulates anything. Okay, so let's see. We have mention of Jeb Bush's son endorsing Donald Trump, which is put this way in the headline at New York Magazine. Jeb Bush's son endorses dad's tormentor. I think that's funny. For president. That's Margaret Hartman writing about that one. By the way, when it comes to if you're worried about political dynasties or if you're worrying about it from the UK, political dynasties, then you need look no further, and indeed I would caution you cannot look any further than the Bush family, really. I still maintain the position that the Clintons don't count as a dynasty as they are, one, a single generation, and two, not related by blood. Now, if and when Chelsea runs, you have the makings of a dynasty, although it's still just two generations. I don't know. I think when you get to a third generation is when you start worrying about dynasties. But I guess in the case of the presidency, any second occurrence as between generations will establish the credentials, in my view, anyway. Okay, let's see. What else have we got here? Greg just sent me a couple of other bits here. Let's take a peek. A tweet that says, in Michigan today, Detroit Free Press notes that former Republican Governor Milliken, not Michael Milken, the junk bond trader, but Governor of Michigan, endorses Clinton over Trump. So that's a Republican, another Republican endorsement for Clinton. And what's the second link here? Oh, it's an actual story as opposed to just a tweet, and it's illustrated by the same photo. So I see what's going on here. Several people unlikely to be seen at the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's speech to the Detroit Economic Club later today belong to a pretty exclusive club. No, I can't read this now. This is elites. Come on. You know better than that. Greg also noted that we should discuss the problem of elitism at the next Aspen conference. Yes, absolutely true. Or how about one of those Renaissance weekends? Was that elite? Really? I mean, I think they thought of themselves as being elite. I got the sense that was sort of more new agey than, I guess that's who attends those things. And it would count as elite now. All right. Well, let's see. Anyway, what's the story with Milliken here? Current and former governors of Michigan are either working for the Democratic candidate for president, that's Hillary Clinton, or have declined to endorse Trump in the race for the White House. Former Governor William Milliken, a moderate Republican, I bet people in Michigan are saying, what? He's not. But I don't remember the guy. So anyway, let's see. He broke ranks over the weekend and is endorsing Clinton for the presidency. Here's a quote to make it sound all official and everything. This nation, I don't know what he sounds like. This nation has long prided itself on abiding commitments to tolerance, civility, and equality. I sound like a advertising pitch man more than anything else. We face a critically important choice in this year's presidential election that will define, I tell you, whether we maintain our commitment to those ideals or embark on a path that has doomed other governments and nations throughout history, Milliken said in a statement. So dramatic, the statement. I am saddened and dismayed that the Republican Party this year has nominated a candidate who has repeatedly demonstrated that he does not embrace those ideals. Okay. That's good. Trees, right height, because I feel so strongly about our nation's future, I will be joining the growing list of former and present government officials in casting my vote for Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. Thanks for clearing that one up. Well, he didn't say in 2016, so, yeah, I mean, all right. Well, you remember how they were with Elizabeth Warren. Are you running? No. What do you mean, no, not now, but maybe later? It's not the first time that Governor Milken has chosen a Democrat over a candidate from his own party. Milken endorsed former Governor Jennifer Granholm in her 2006 campaign for governor. Democrat Mark Totten, who ran against and lost to Attorney General Bill Schuett in 2014. Gary Peters in a successful run for the U.S. Senate in 2014. Thank God there's a success in there. I was going to say, this guy endorses it and you lose. And State Rep Gretchen Driscoll in her current bid to unseat U.S. Representative Tim Walberg. I hope that one's a winner. But he has also endorsed Republicans, including Rick Snyder, that's not good, and 2008 presidential candidate John McCain, which was arguably still good news for John McCain. Is there anything else in there? I mean, I talked to Engler. Really, it's an article about who's not going to the Detroit Economic Club speech. But let's see. Former Governor John Engler wasn't available over the weekend to talk about the race. He's at odds with both Clinton and Trump. He told the Washington Times in June that the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement, which both candidates oppose, is a top priority for the Business Roundtable. Okay. He added in the article that businesses are in an absolute fight for global talent, like Melania's modeling, I guess, which means that attracting workers from other countries like Slovenia for jobs with high vacancies like fashion modeling or naked modeling. That's not fashion modeling. There's no fashion involved. You have no clothes on. Including engineers and scientists is a priority. Trump has been an ardent foe of more open immigration into the U.S. except for Melania, and suggested banning immigrants from countries with high rates of terrorism, building a wall along the border with Mexico, you know all about that, and deporting all undocumented immigrants like Melania. Michigan Republican Party spokeswoman Sandra Anderson said Milliken's endorsement of Clinton was irrelevant. It's news when Milliken endorses Republicans these days, she says. Okay. I can believe that. And Roz McGregor might have something to say about that at some. Although I suspect it's rather unimportant in her view either. Although I don't doubt that she might want to note it in a roundup or something like that. But okay, and maybe you can tell me whether you take exception with defining him as a moderate Republican. I don't know. Maybe you don't. Maybe there are such things, or there were such things at one point. These days, it's just a label they hang on every Republican who isn't Donald Trump, I think. All right. Let's catch up on some other things that are in pocket here. I thought the Jeb Bush thing was somewhat interesting. I don't know if I want to sort through that. He is, in fact, what do they call it? What's his job? Land commissioner? Or I don't even know what that is. Texas has some very weird statewide elected offices that essentially are parking spaces to get in line for the governorship. Land commissioner, they got railroad commissioners, they got state insurance guys. It's a weird system. But yeah, he's the land commissioner. I don't know. I mean, is there anything interesting in this other than the fact that he's Jeb's son? And they live, it's weird, the ones that choose to live in Texas versus the ones that choose to live in Florida. Now, do any of them live in Connecticut anymore? I'm not really sure. Let's see. One of the many bizarre aspects of the 2016 campaign is that it's turned Ted Cruz into one of the more relatable and even likable Republican leaders. How about that? That's the beginning of the New York article about Jeb. For instance, the day after he was booed at the Republican National Convention for refusing to endorse Donald Trump, the Texas senator offered a very understandable explanation. I am not in the habit of supporting someone who attacks my wife and attacks my father. The same cannot be said for George P. Bush. Over the weekend, the Texas Land Commissioner declared it's time for Republicans to put aside their differences and support Donald Trump. From Team Bush, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but you know what? You get back up and you help the man that won and you make sure that we stop Hillary Clinton, Bush said in an event for state Republican activists. The Bush family has a proud history of not enthusiastically supporting each other's presidential ambitions. Barbara Bush famously said, "We've had enough Bushes," though she eventually backed Jeb's campaign. Poor Jeb is really getting it from all sides. As you'll recall, Trump didn't just beat George P. Bush's dad in a primary. In addition to humiliating Jeb with the label low energy, he said President George W. Bush lied, quote, lied, about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, tweeted an offensive remark about Columba, that's George P.'s mom, and then refused to apologize to her. The Bush family dislikes Trump so much that the last two Republican presidents don't plan to endorse him and didn't attend the Republican National Convention. Plus, the endorsement comes as other Republicans are distancing themselves from Trump for reasons that have nothing to do with him insulting a family member. So why back Trump now? Probably because the younger Bush is facing political pressure to support the nominee. He's still rising in the ranks. He's still parked in line, right? You want to be governor? As a Republican? Well, where were you for the Republican ticket in 2016? Oh, it was all, and that would be interesting, right? I mean, we were all over George W. Bush for making his political decisions because that guy insulted / tried to kill. That's a little different. My dad. So maybe he's just trying to shed that image. All right. Well, let's see. So he's facing political pressure to support the nominee. Oh, there's additional things besides being land commissioner. He is the state Republican Party's victory chairman. That's a big deal. George P. Bush is therefore tasked with leading the campaign to, quote, annihilate the Democrats up and down the ballot this November. I don't know whose quote that is. And it seems someone feels we haven't had enough Bushes in politics, and at least George P. Bush probably thinks that. So he's still got rising to do in the ranks. But valid question, as Greg reminds us, post-Trump defeat, will you rise in the ranks by pointing to your ability to, blindly toe the line, or will they be looking for people who stood up? In other words, are they going to be looking for former Vichy officials, or are they going to be looking to the Gaullists, right? Well, the French are no indication of anything for us, really. All right, well, let's see. Moving on just for a moment then to McMullen, just because if I don't do McMullen now, today, he might be irrelevant by the end of the show, so I better get this in. He might already be irrelevant now. I haven't been following Twitter. But I don't think they reacted very well to him. So it is actually slightly more ridiculous, perhaps, than the David French flotation. The French flotation. That's my new film coming out in 2017. This piece, BuzzFeed, why not? We'll read BuzzFeed on this because nobody else has had a chance to publish on McMullen. McKay Coppins is the writer behind this one. You could do worse. He knows what's up with this guy. Anti-Trump Republican launching independent presidential bid. Evan McMullen wouldn't make an unlikely presidential candidate. He does. He is making one. He has never held elective office before. That's okay. And has spent most of his career as a CIA officer. That's highly questionable. Key players in the GOP's anti-Trump movement, if there is such a thing as the anti-Trump movement or key players in it, are preparing to launch an independent presidential campaign for Evan McMullen, a CIA veteran, and the chief policy director of the House Republican Conference. Sources close to the effort told BuzzFeed News. Veteran Republican strategist Rick Wilson, mostly known on Twitter, more so than for his strategy, a Florida-based media consultant and outspoken Trump critic, and he's been good at that, is expected to be involved in McMullen's campaign. Sources said Wilson was in Washington on Sunday, meeting with members of McMullen's prospective campaign, which includes some who were involved in a group called Better for America, which has been pushing an independent presidential bid. It's hopeless, but whatever. You get to fly to Washington. McMullen did not immediately respond to requests for comment. From BuzzFeed News, he would make an unlikely presidential candidate. He has never held elective office before, spent most of his career as a CIA officer, according to his LinkedIn page, for which he'll have to kill you for reading. Young and unmarried, McMullen received an MBA at Wharton in 2011. So Wharton grad, that's good. And the actual MBA side grad, not undergrad economics BS like, what's his name? Trump. And after a stint at Goldman Sachs, that'll endear him to everybody, went to work as a policy wonk on Capitol Hill. Wonk, not an official title, of course, but we figured out what it is that he's he's doing. Unlike National Review writer David French, getting a mention in this piece, another conservative courted by anti-Trump Republicans to launch a long-shot third-party bid, McMullen has virtually no public profile. By the way, I object to referring to these guys as third-party candidates if they're independents. It's a third something. I mean, a third ballot line, but it's not a party. I guess you could form a party. We don't know that they won't. Anyway, a small point. Never mind. Moving on. McMullen has virtually no public profile. He doesn't appear regularly on television. Has he ever? And has just 135 followers on Twitter. What the hell with that? Me for president, then. What? I mean, that's not obviously a reasonable measure, but so I think it sounds like all of his followers are on the committee to get him to run for president. So per capita, he's doing better than me, probably. His most high-profile recent appearance seems to have been, it seems that way, but we're not sure, a TEDx talk about genocide that he gave at the London Business School in April. So that's really all it takes, is a TEDx talk about genocide, which wasn't a how-to, so that's the difference between him and Trump. Even with his small audience, McMullen has been a vocal critic of Trump on social media. I mean, that's really shouting in the dark, though. On the night of Trump's speech at the Republican National Convention, he tweeted that Trump was an authoritarian who was seeking to infringe on civil rights. So what? So did I. How come I'm not being touted for president? Well, how did he say? I said, Donald Trump is a effing dick, and that's why nobody nominated me. Evan McMullen said, authoritarians like real Donald Trump, using his Twitter handle, use promises of law and order to justify infringing on civil rights as they consolidate control by force. Oh, thank you. That's great. Can I have some water? That was such a dry statement. I'm parched from reading that one. And earlier this month, Evan McMullen wrote a Facebook post sharply criticizing Trump's rhetoric about Muslims and terrorism. As Donald Trump continues attacking Muslims and as a former... That's terribly written. And as a former CIA officer, I'd like all Americans to know the truth. American and other Muslims have played a central role in virtually every counterterrorism win we've had since 9/11. They are an indispensable asset in this fight. Attacking them as a group makes America weaker, not stronger. All true, just not that well said. He needs campaign guys to help him with that. Sources said McMullen was planning to file his paperwork Monday, that's today, around noon, that's in about 2 hours. Apart from his low profile, his candidacy will face other substantial hurdles in gaining traction. First of all, he'd be our first bald president, I believe. Well, going back a ways anyway. First modern era bald president. Can you be president without hair? You should. It should be possible, but think about it. Has it been done? That might be, I don't know. I mean, it's at least as serious as who do you think is going to win the election. Especially with ballot access and fundraising, those will be the substantial hurdles. But people close to the effort suggested McMullen would have the backing of serious Republican donors, whatever they are, and fundraisers. They also pointed to his ties to Utah, whatever that is, a state where polls show Trump badly underperforming with the Mormon-heavy electorate. McMullen, an alum of Brigham Young University, and Wharton, plans to aggressively contest the state. I plan to aggressively contest that it's worth contesting. But all right, I'm still not entirely clear on what the idea there is, but, anything to detract from Trump, I suppose. So there you have it. It's 10 o'clock, almost on the nose. I went a few seconds over. That may be the end of the Evan McMullen thing by now, but he's still got 2 hours to decide it's not worth filing his paperwork. Just trying to help you out. I mean, if you're listening, Evan, that's at least as helpful to you as the traffic report. I mean, just from a logistics and pragmatism standpoint. You might want to save yourself the trip, though I suspect you live, in a place where the papers, wherever you file them, I guess the FEC is accessible by Metro, so it's not a big deal. You can Uber over. Some Republican donor will pay for your Uber. All right. That reminds me. I don't have any pieces available on this. I'm going to have to go and do some research so we can read some things, and maybe that's something to examine during next week. While I'm away, it would be a good pre-recorded piece because we've got plenty of politics to get to. But I was thinking about, still on my mind is the Bryant Gumbel Real Sports thing about the International Olympic Committee. It's what a great grift situation that is. I'm going to look up some good articles that we can share about those things, but it occurred to me, have you seen this? If you haven't, I recommend it to you. But there's interesting politics involved in it too. And it was pretty easy to see right at the outset that the critics that they were having on giving legitimate criticisms of the IOC were also very easily could have been described as people who are disgruntled former petitioners of the IOC who lost their bids to bring the Olympics to their cities. But more revealing than that was the reasons why those bids failed or were withdrawn. There was a very, very interesting segment about how the Olympic Committee these days tends to want to locate their games in authoritarian countries. I'm thinking there's probably more background I should have added to this, but there was a Norwegian bid underway for what I assume was the Winter Games, but you can never tell anymore. And part of the overarching story in the piece, or that was the whole show, was dedicated to the Olympic Committee situation on Real Sports. And it's an older piece too. I think they're just running it now because the games are on. But it sounded like it ran a month or two ago. But anyway, it was very interesting watching them discuss. And I had forgotten that the last Winter Games, Sochi, were held in a place with a subtropical climate. That Sochi has nothing to do with winter anything. I guess they have winters, but they've got palm trees in Sochi. It's a warm weather resort. But they put the Winter Olympics there, and that doesn't make any sense. And you might have wondered at the time, why in the world would you put the Olympics there? And, it probably became obvious right around then, well, you can bribe the International Olympic Committee into doing stuff like that. Now it seems that they're considering a future Winter Games, and I guess we'd be talking about like out in the 2020s in Beijing, which might ring a bell to you because you say, weren't the Olympics just basically in Beijing? Yeah, they were. Not that long ago in Beijing, but they were the Summer Olympics. And does Beijing have the climate to be able to host either or both? No, it doesn't. It's got largely the same climate, I understand, as, if not the same climate as Sochi, then certainly, faces great difficulties in being able to support Winter Games. Also, no mountains to speak of. There are mountains in China, they're just not in Beijing. Anyway, it becomes clearer and clearer as you watch, certainly as you watch their piece, but as you watch the Winter Olympics be awarded to places that don't have any hope of being able to produce snow naturally, you say, the only reason that there could be behind this is, I guess, bribery / leverage of some kind, if you don't want to call it bribery outright, of the International Olympic Committee. And as we learned with the FIFA scandals, it's a job that's just highly susceptible to that. One, the body is international, so it's never quite clear whose law obtains with respect to what, and what bribery cultures in different countries would have to say about such things. And you wield enormous influence in where millions, in fact, of billions sometimes, of dollars are going to be spent. So it's actually an enormously important job, even though it's just about sports. But it also means that, like I said, millions and sometimes billions of dollars are at stake, which means that some smaller sub-portion of that can be peeled off and used as bribes. If you're going to send me $10 billion in business, then I can afford to kick back several tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to you, and the IOC knows that. And some of the bribery is outright bribery. Give me $2 million and I'll vote for your city. And the rest of it is more informal bribery done under what could be called color of law. Apparently, the IOC's contracts with host cities include all kinds of extraordinarily expensive and sometimes extraordinarily ridiculous perks for IOC members. Of course, they get the best hotel rooms and all of that, but in fact, they usually demand either a newly constructed hotel entirely, but if not that, the Norwegians, for instance, in the show were complaining that one of the demands was that IOC members get, penthouse suites in the hotels and that there be butler service. What? Butler service? I mean, have any of you ever stayed at a hotel that even offered butler service that you knew of? I gather that many hotels probably would do that if you were a super, the equivalent of a super high roller. If you were dropping tens of thousands of dollars on a bill there, they would probably give you a concierge of some kind, or maybe even just call, for the amount of money the guy's spending, call yourself a butler for the week. Whatever. So it probably exists, but it doesn't exist in my realm. I don't get anywhere near anything like that. Maybe you've seen it, but you imagine that you demand that for the IOC? So what a life. I guess it's funny. It follows from where the IOC came from. We're just going all the way back to the origin of the modern Olympic movement. This was established at a time when I guess it made eminent sense that if you were getting together internationally to organize something as, as elitist as an, international movement for cooperation and peace through sport, but only amateur sport. And at the time, it's the Europeans organizing this thing. The whole world will get together for our competitions. England, France, Germany, Norway, for instance, perhaps Sweden, maybe something really exotic like Austria or Italy, where they're sort of brownish down at the south. I mean, they did have a different worldview. This was not about, getting the Central Americans to participate or what have you, but recalling that, what were the original games? The track and field athletics, some wrestling perhaps, to satisfy the ancient purists, but modern pentathlon, fencing, pistol shooting, this is equestrian events probably. It was garbage back in the day. But who would you get to do stuff like that? Well, European nobles and maybe even royalty too. You would need people that would have to have gravitas in that day, and that would be nobles and royals, right? And plus, of course, the money to be able to say, all right, well, from each of you members of the International Olympic Committee, we're going to need some big bucks to put this thing on. This is going to be an expensive undertaking. They didn't have Coca-Cola to sponsor them at the time. So it was going to be rich people. It was going to be aristocrats. And then it just stayed rich people and aristocrats. And I guess along the way, at some point, I suppose back in the early 1900s, certainly in the 1800s when they began this thing, and probably well into the 20th century, it probably didn't strike anybody as weird or nonsensical to say that International Olympic Committee members would have to get, perks like this and butler service and exclusive access to the venues and whatnot, because you were talking about the King of Sweden and the Earl of this and that, and and then even in the later days, in the second half of the 20th century, when you're talking about Saudi Arabian royalty being on the board too. So, okay, butler service. Well, for a king, that doesn't seem that ridiculous. But what about if you're just a former soccer official made good in your corner of the world, and they need somebody from your continent on the IOC to maintain some balance? You just cut yourself in on these things. The Beijing Olympics in particular, apparently, I guess the perk that stuck out in my mind was they had special lanes built on the highways You know how you'll be driving along and you see the HOV lanes? They're sometimes designated, in our area, they're designated with those diamonds. They paint it right on the blacktop. They had Olympic flags painted in the lanes, and I guess it was just IOC officials only. They might have used it to transport athletes from venue to venue, too, and that's probably the cover with which they would make it acceptable. Can you imagine, though, trying to get an extra lane built on all the highways around any host city in a Western democracy? Try doing that in if wherever, any American city, any Western city hosting or looking to host the games. If you demand from them, I got to build an entirely new lane on the highway that's just going to be for Olympic officials, plus the Butler thing. Plus, of course, VIP suites in every venue, which you have to, in most cases, build from the ground up. So I want a luxury box for my IOC members, security for IOC members. They actually even have clauses in the contract guaranteeing the quality of food and drink being given to IOC members. Now, for rich people, for people who are royalty and earls and all that, what's the problem with picking up the tab yourself? You're extraordinarily rich. But really, they're rich in the Donald Trump sense in many ways. Some of these guys, too. I guess these guys have a lot more cash on hand than Donald Trump, but they don't spend their own. That's the trick of being rich. And we keep coming back to that theme on the show one way or another, whether it's talking about the gifting suite at the Oscars or Donald Trump ducking out on his bills or using other people's money to conduct his charity so that he can go to charity functions, parties, essentially, for free. Same thing here. The International Olympic Committee goes to the world's biggest party every 2 years for free. But what's also interesting, I'm thinking about how much time do International Olympic Committee members spend, quote-unquote, researching the bids of the various cities. For 2 weeks every 2 years, they are treated like the royalty that they actually are, but treated to it for free at the expense of the city hosting the games. But what about the rest of the time? Is it really worth doing? Well, if you're visiting 20 cities that are bidding for the Olympics every year and you visit each one for a week to 2 weeks and they have to spend lavishly on entertaining you, you're basically year-round just living on somebody else's tab if you want to. Going around to the best hotels, eating the best food, touring the nicest places, and having government officials escort you around and showing you a good time. And then on top of that, you get a bribe of $1 million or $2 million in cash, some of them. And then every 2 years, 2 weeks of Olympic Games, you celebrate living in even higher style than that. If they don't all get hepatitis in Rio, of course, and drop dead. We still have to wait to see how that's going to go. And a big section on the program about that as well. Also very interesting. We'll have to look into that. And we could spend next week then talking about the rest of the Olympics. I just thought it was really fascinating and just thinking of the dynamics of how you could be living the 24/7, 365 bribe lifestyle as part of the International Olympic Committee. Oh, also the other very important point that they were making was that for a movement dedicated to peace, prosperity, cooperation, freedom, human rights, etc., through sport, that they are increasingly finding what kinds of countries will agree to delivering you that kind of bribery package, that they'll build an extra. You can't build an extra lane on a highway around here in Washington, D.C. because you would have to bulldoze people's houses to do it. Well, in some countries, they don't mind bulldozing people's houses. I know. Many of you are already saying Israel, right? But they're not bidding for the games. They're just doing it for their own reasons, which is an issue for another day, like someday when I'm not here. Anyway, troublesome. So I'm not going to be able to satisfy you on Israel. I'll just move on. But yeah, in China, in Russia, that's not an issue. If they need to bulldoze your house to build a more luxurious box suite for the International Olympic Committee or a special lane on the highway, they do it. And so what they're finding is for the movement dedicated to the ideals of Western democracy, Western democracies just aren't going to be able to deliver the kind of games that the IOC members want. They're instead finding that it's better to have the games in authoritarian regimes, which were avoided for a long time when they were more serious about their ideals, although maybe it was never because they were serious about their ideals, but rather because at the time authoritarian regimes were largely bankrupt and were the kinds of places that were dedicated more. They were authoritarian because they were pouring their resources into modernizing on behalf of the population. I'm sure they were all, as most authoritarians were doing, they were stealing plenty for themselves. But for instance, the Soviet Union or Mao's China or other places, they weren't receptive to the idea of having an international capitalist party. But now that they've become comfortable with it because they're really just oppressive oligarchies and not ideologically, they don't operate as ideologically as they used to, I guess. Authoritarian regimes are quite happy to do these deals, and they're the only ones who can deliver on them. Western democracies say, I can't build you that. I can't do it. I can't find the money. I can't bulldoze people's houses. It's very interesting. So now their preferred partners are authoritarian regimes. All right. I said we would get off of this topic, and I was lying. But let's move on to something else. Let's see. Here's something that Judy Vincent sent me. I just thought I would share this one because it's something awful that happened in a Walmart parking lot that wasn't a shooting. How do you like that? And who better to report on this than BuzzFeed? To be honest, thousands of bees accidentally released in a Walmart parking lot send 3 to the hospital. Not 3 bees, 3 people stung by bees. I don't know what happened. The bees are dead. But not all of them. They had to call another beekeeper in to try and resolve the situation, which is weird because now that I think about it. Okay, so how did the bees get released in a parking lot? Well, one guy was selling a beehive to another guy, as sometimes happens, I guess, and exchanges of guns and cell phones and everything else that gets sold on Craigslist. People want to meet for whatever reason in Walmart parking lots. Anyway, somebody accidentally released the bees, and it is interesting. In the reporting I see here, and it's Salvador Hernandez, this is the BuzzFeed reporter on this, it says, where was it? Down here, I skimmed it before. Yeah, here you are. Firefighters asked for 2 paramedic units and a beekeeper to the scene. That must have been extraordinarily surprising on the dispatcher radio. But here's my question. 2 people who are meeting in the Walmart parking lot to exchange and to sell a beehive. Okay. And then, well, the bees got out. We need a beekeeper immediately. Help us. Send us a beekeeper. And it's like, who were the 2 guys buying and selling beehives? Are they not beekeepers? Although I guess it's certainly, you could make the argument, well, they say they're beekeepers, but they're terrible at it because look what happened. They didn't keep the bees at all. The bees are out. So we need a third party beekeeper on this one, as these 2 are incompetent. So in comes Evan McMullen of beekeeping is brought in to try and straighten this one out. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what to say about it except it's interesting because it happened in a Walmart. That's funny. And Judy Vincent sent it, and I thought that was a good distraction. By the way, and other news that Judy Vincent will be interested in, but which is not amusing in the least. How about this one? I told you that my son recently came back from Northern Tier High Adventure Camp canoeing in the Minnesota/Canada border waters. A very exciting adventure it was. And while they were out there, they had their share of weather. They had a night or 2 of pretty severe storms, which they survived nicely in their tents. But tragic news that has only just reached me, but just about a week after my son got off the water, a scout troop from Texas was out on one of the lakes that my son was on. He recognized the lake, and now I've forgotten the name of it already, but certainly one that's easily recognizable by anybody who's been up to Northern Tier. but camping on the same lake. They were on the Canadian side of the lake. My son, I think, at that point was back on the American side of the lake. They were caught in an overnight storm, very severe storm, and a scout and adult scout leader killed by falling trees during the storm, fell on their tents and killed them, and a couple other of the scouts rather severely injured, but thankfully have survived. But an amazing reminder of the fact that this stuff is no joke, and you run some risks while you're out there. So I was using the opportunity to remind my son, who has already served his stint as camping instructor for his troop, and my younger son, who has just recently joined the same troop. It's no joke when the camping instructor tells you to take a look, inspect your prospective campsite for dead tree limbs, right? Make sure you don't camp under any of those, as my son instructed the new scouts that remember, you want to look around, look above you, anywhere you're thinking of camping, look for any dead tree limbs. You don't want to be under those, because dead trees and dead tree limbs make dead scouts. They really do. So, tragic, I guess we're stuck with thoughts and prayers, having to go out to this, I believe it's Troop 121 in Texas, and that's really surprising, but it's really out there. And my son was rather affected by that one, just because he knew the spot. And I don't know, I guess that added to the sense of adventure of it all, and there's not that much that can be done to prevent that. And I guess in a storm of that magnitude, live trees fall too. So, anyway, amazing news. I just thought I'd throw that one in there. Didn't mean to bring us all down, but captured my attention, and so that's important enough for me. All right, speaking of the Olympics, but not departing from my usual range of topics, at least I hope not for the rest of the show. Here's Olympic gun fail. Now, a lot of people tweeted me over the weekend to point out that the very first medal awarded in the Olympics went to an American, but went to an American for shooting sports, and that they thought that was quite relevant in our way. Just indicative of what's important in America and where we put our emphasis. But as you know, that was air rifle, and we don't count air rifle accidents in gun fail. It has to be a firearm with actual black powder, or else it doesn't count, or the people who yell at you for saying clip rather than magazine will get all up in arms. I'm not really sure why. I've certainly seen a good number of injuries and even deaths caused by air rifles and air pistols as well. But anyway, that was worth noting. Also, though, worth noting, gun fail, actual fail at the Olympics. In this case, let's turn to Fox Sports on this one. The headline, military bullet accidentally shot through press tent at Rio Olympics. That's honest-to-God gun fail, but for the fact that it happened in Brazil and not the United States. Dan Carson is the reporter. Military personnel on the ground in Rio are claiming a bullet that shot through the equestrian press tent. That's okay. On Saturday was an accident. It doesn't really matter because, of course, all the equestrians are protected by those top hats that they wear. Did you see Mr. Peanut in the dressage? It was fantastic. I was very proud of him. Good job. Also, the guy from the talcum powder won as well. Top hats. Is that a sport? I'm very critical of that. It's very tough, I'm sure. I couldn't do it, but I don't know that anybody needs to. Anyway, sorry if I crapped on your sport. Or if my bullet flew through your tent. Horse and Hound's Alice Collins. Horse and Hound, an actual publication that credentials reporters, and how do they raise the money to send them to Rio? I don't know. I guess rich people read Horse and Hound. Anyway, Alice Collins reports that the bullet, a 5.56 millimeter assault rifle round, which would probably be genuine assault rifle as it is a military issue, in Brazil anyway, pierced the roof of the tent occupied by journalists and fell to the floor. News Hub reporter Melissa Davies tweeted images from the scene, and I can see there is in fact a hole in the tent. It doesn't look that scary, but when bullets do it, it shakes people up a little bit. Let's see. The small tear in the roof where suspected bullet It is a bullet. I've seen it. I see a picture right here. Came through. New Zealand team staff were inside at the time. She is, of course, from News Hub, New Zealand. There is a photo. There's really not very much disputing that that's a bullet. It's pretty clear. It's not that badly damaged. No one was hurt, thankfully. The bullet landed closest to British photographer John Stroud, and images were taken. It didn't pierce the carpeted floor of the tent, so it must have been shot up in the air and come down, so hopefully it wasn't moving that quickly. Well, it was a pointy-looking bullet, though, so I guess it could have still done some damage if it hit you on the way down, even at a slower pace. Let's see. Then Melissa Davies later tweets, equestrian venue update, assessment from New Zealand police. I guess they went with him. Is a bullet was fired unintentionally at the media center. According to Collins, the bullet is being credited as a, quote, negligent discharge, from a nearby military base. A hole remains in the ceiling, but it is a tent and should be easily patched. So there you go. Gun fail, even down there in the Olympics. Good old Brazil. Good job with the military there. It happens everywhere. It's not your fault, Brazil. Okay, let's see. Let's see what else we can squeeze in here. I'm going to say I got one long form one to do, and we're definitely going to get to that. Let's revisit a story I teased earlier. Newt Gingrich will never pay his 2012 campaign debt. Arthur Delaney reporting this one for the Huffington Post, and that's up our alley. Let's take a look at that one and see if there's any explanation as to why, or is it just one of those things where they say, F it, I don't know how you can make me, so I'm not gonna. Paul Blumenthal getting a byline on this one. Let's see. They note at the outset in the subheader that Newt 2012 racked up $4.6 million in debt that will never be repaid. Newt Gingrich apparently has no plans to pay back dozens of small businesses that made yard signs and TV ads for his 2012 presidential campaign. Gingrich filed a document with the Federal Election Commission this week. There's an actual document that you file that says, hey, I ain't paying. Detailing a debt settlement plan to finally terminate his 2012 presidential campaign committee. The document shows that Newt 2012 plans, this is the actual plan, to stiff 114 businesses and consultants that are altogether owed $4.6 million. So that's amazing that there's even paperwork that you can file. What's your plan to pay? My plan is to not pay. Okay, we'll put that on file. The former House Speaker, failed presidential candidate, and Donald Trump vice president runner-up, allegedly anyway, was forced to file the debt settlement plan with the FEC as part of its alternative dispute resolution process. Gingrich was the subject of a complaint alleging that his campaign had illegally commingled campaign funds with corporate funds from a company controlled by Gingrich and his wife, Callista. Familiar sounding? Illegally commingled campaign funds with corporate funds. Yes, okay, fine, sure. From a company controlled by Gingrich and his wife, Callista. Oh, scratch that. Trump, right? This probably happens a lot, though. But these guys, birds of a feather. While the FEC General Counsel found reason to believe the allegations in the complaint, the 6 commissioners split along ideological lines in a 3-3 vote. What? Why don't we try a super committee? Maybe that would fix it. So, guess what? It doesn't penalize Gingrich. Instead, the campaign agreed to file a debt settlement plan and terminate in 2016. The plan was originally due on May 23rd, but Gingrich was granted an extension to August 1st. Can you imagine that? I need an extension. Why? I mean, when you hand in the final and they say, let me get this straight. On May 23rd, you couldn't just write down, I'm not paying? Was there any sense that you were thinking of paying on May 23rd? Because that's not true. You know what it was? Maybe this is it. On May 23rd, I could end up as vice president on this ticket. So I need an extension. Because if I'm named vice president, I have to start making serious plans to repay this stuff. Although I am going to be named Donald Trump's vice president, and there's no chance in the world he would pay any of these things, and he never does, and it can't hurt the ticket anymore if I don't. But if for some reason the Trump campaign in vetting me were to demand that I settle those debts and actually pay them, or at least pay them partially, then okay, then I need an extension. So that was probably it. Give me an extension until August 1st. By that point, I'll know whether I am vice presidential candidate or not. If I am, then I will file a payment plan. If I'm not, then I will file the F everybody plan. And that's what they did. The debt settlement plan document indicates that the total amount to be paid creditors is $0. Gingrich did not respond to a request for comment made through two spokespeople. The way they should settle this, quite honestly, is somehow you should dueling is out of the question, but basically the creditors should just be able to punch Gingrich in the face wherever they meet him. It's really just, God. You want law and order in things? Let creditors punch your face inside out with no penalty. Some of them will take it. Look, I'm only owed a couple $1,000s. I've been living without it for years as it is. But boy, the opportunity to smash his nose flat, I'll take that in lieu of payment. God, that's so infuriating. And the whole time he's just like, I'm just not gonna. I don't know why anybody extends credit to these guys, ever. Gingrich did not respond to a request for comment made through two spokespeople. Why would he? He's not responding to a request for payment, so why comment? It's common for political campaigns to wind up in debt that takes years to pay off. President Barack Obama's 2012 campaign still owes $725,583, down from nearly $2 million 2 years ago. But Gingrich owes an unusually large amount from his battle with Mitt Romney in the 2012 Republican primary. Remember, Barack Obama, for all that he owes, campaigned all the way through the season and then won the presidency. So he was on the campaign trail for a lot longer, and he had a $2 million debt. Gingrich was on the trail much less, far, far less, and has more than twice the debt. And isn't going to pay it either. The debts are owed to small firms that helped Gingrich campaign knock on doors. Yeah, right, he knocked on nothing. Other people knocked on doors. Call voters. Again, other people. Produce TV ads. That one he played in. And distribute yard signs, which don't vote. I know. Anyway, in 2012, the Huffington Post interviewed several vendors who were pretty mad about getting stiffed. The sums involved, tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, weren't chump change for small business. We got burned, a Las Vegas graphics company owner said then. But by last year, several vendors seemed to accept the fact that Newt would never pay, so they had given up on contacting the campaign in an effort to collect. There's no point. No one's answering the phone. One vendor told Huffington Post in July 2015 that Gingrich is, quote, not the first politician to disappoint his supporters, and he won't be the last. So, that's that. I guess we all expected that. But again, grifting, lifestyle candidacy, no surprise. The only surprise is that they will still put this guy on television, or that other people don't just stab him in the neck on the street at some point. I don't advocate doing it. I understand the feeling. That's all. Anyway, probably at this point a good time to move on to the bigger bombshells of the weekend that we haven't discussed yet, and we really haven't paid enough attention to what the ever-loving F is going on at Fox News. And the answer is all the things you feared were going on at Fox News. This time I want to turn to another New York piece. New York, the shining star of today's program. This time Gabriel Sherman with this one. Roger Ailes, that disgusting bastard, used Fox News budget to finance black room campaigns against his enemies. So he was sexually assaulting all the women there, and also doing this. This is an extraordinarily dirty person, in every sense of the word, who used this business as a personal power base and empire to satisfy, well, every urge he ever had, I guess, and to again, there's lifestyle candidates, and this guy was a lifestyle CEO, as many of them are, really. But this, of course, above and beyond. Company car, company paid house, all that stuff, life insurance. The things they give CEOs are really pretty incredible. And I guess rise to the level in some cases of butlered hotel suites, in the sense that you'll never see any of that. In terms of the perks that they give, company cars people get, housing expenses people get. But the thing, I don't know, it's amazing what these guys get. Anyway, in this case, things he gave himself. And keeping in mind throughout the reading of this, some of the other larger implications, like that this guy basically dictated the tenor of American politics for 25 years and landed us where we are, not just Donald Trump, but even minus Donald Trump. Let's suppose the Donald Trump phenomenon never happens. We're still talking about a politics dominated by the kinds of candidates where it's pitched as a substantive issue that one of them didn't wear a lapel pin, a flag lapel pin, or that the lapel pin was the flag of the Honduras instead of the military service star or whatever else. But that's Fox has done all of this. And before I go on, yes, I should note, Bill tweets here. So basically Newt Gingrich is declaring bankruptcy on his 2012 campaign to be the nominee from the party of fiscal responsibility. Yes, exactly. Everything they say they're for, they're personally really not for. The hypocrisy is thoroughgoing. And I still maintain that that's more the case for Republicans than it is for Democrats, and that's possibly because, well, the Roger Ailes framed demands of political culture in America are impossible to live up to on the Republican side. Everybody has to be super patriotic and super moral and super this and super that. Nobody lives up to that, and that's the big problem with Republicans, is they will refuse to recognize this. I mean, there are certainly situations in which you want to appeal to and aspire to an ideal, but I mean, at some point you have to say humans are humans, and we're not all perfect. And they only say that when they're caught doing something that they say they're against, and even then they just say Jesus forgave them for it, so what's the difference? But Republicans are weird, and I maintain weirder than Democrats. But let's get to Roger Ailes here, because this is another serious allegation on top of the sexual harassment allegations, which I maintain we still haven't made a big enough deal of. That guy basically just ran a sex club for himself and pretended it was a news station, and it sucked at being a news station. And we kept saying that it was BS as news, and that other networks should stop defending them as a sister network, as occasionally happened every time they were even close to being called out as being a ridiculous PR operation. Well, now we know that they were, in fact, that same ridiculous PR operation we thought they were. But the fact that there's a sex ring on top of it is bad. I'm out of words. I'm out of words for these guys. But check this story out. It speaks for itself, I think. Not that I'll let it. As Rupert Murdoch seeks to stabilize Fox News in the wake of Roger Ailes' ouster, and we should by no means, I don't know how Rupert Murdoch isn't tainted in all this. So far he's been able to be like, oh my gosh, well, get rid of him. Say he's somebody else. Like these guys weren't hand in glove. What the hell is Roger Ailes doing running this place? You can't run an organization of any kind for 25 years and not have the owners know what you're doing. Although Rupert Murdoch is kind of a doofus, and maybe he just send me checks and do whatever the hell you want. Anyway, Rupert Murdoch seeks to stabilize Fox News in the wake of Ailes' ouster. A crucial question now, though, remains unanswered. How was Ailes able to spend millions of dollars to settle sexual harassment claims without setting off alarm bells? That is a good question. Why are we only finding out about this thanks to Gretchen Carlson, who, by the way, might deserve the Presidential Medal of Freedom for all this, which is very hard for me to say and accept, because how many times do I want to throw her off a cliff? Anyway, according to 3 highly placed sources, part of the answer is that there were few checks on Ailes when it came to the Fox News budget. I'll just pause to say Gretchen Carlson, probably the one of the anchors I wanted least often to throw off of a cliff. The men are far worse. Just to make a gender issue out of it. It was the culture, one Fox executive said. You didn't ask questions, and Roger wouldn't entertain questions. So, again, the question here, how is it that he spent multiple millions of dollars settling sexual harassment claims without anybody saying, what the hell's going on here? Look at the numbers. This is publicly owned, or well, I guess it's not. Is it a publicly owned company? I guess maybe it's not. But still, nobody is noticing this. This guy is costing us extra millions of dollars. I'm giving him perks, but some of the perks aren't supposed to be paying settlements on sexual harassment suits because this guy wants to fondle every woman that comes through the door. Why don't we eliminate that expense? That would be great, right? I mean, there were people who've been laid off at Fox News before, and they didn't have to be laid off if there wasn't so much money going out the door for sexual harassment suits. There is that. This guy's jollies were more important to the execs than your job. But then again, in a world with butlered penthouse suites and special lanes for IOC members, I guess that's old news. Anyway, you didn't ask questions. Roger wouldn't entertain questions. One former News Corp executive explained that because Fox made more than $1 billion in annual profits, the funds that were used for settlements amounted to little more than a rounding error. But with Ailes gone, by the way, your daughter or sister or wife possibly was a rounding error. Just wanted to point that out for you victims of his sexual harassment. But with Ailes gone, Fox executives are now looking closely at how Ailes spent Fox money. And what they are discovering is that beyond the sexual harassment claims, Ailes was also able to use portions of the Fox budget to hire consultants, political operatives, what, a news organization, and private detectives, who reported only to him, according to a senior Fox source. All right, what is this all a part of? Last week, according to the source, Fox News dismissed 5 consultants whom Ailes had hired to do work that was more about advancing his own agenda than Fox's. That would be a small violation of his fiduciary duties to Fox, but whatever. In addition, it poses other problems. One of the consultants, Bert Solivan, S-O-L-I-V-A-N, ran negative PR campaigns against Ailes' personal and political enemies out of Fox News headquarters, a source said. What? A Fox News spokesperson confirmed Sullivan was recently informed that his services were no longer needed. Sullivan, who had previously worked for Fox News as a general manager of the channel's website, did not respond to requests for comment. I need to know more. According to one highly placed source, Sullivan worked out of what Fox insiders called the Black Room, an operation Ailes established around 2011 to conduct PR and surveillance campaigns against people he targeted both inside and outside the company. Now, how is it that we didn't learn about most of the sexual harassment cases? Some were settled out of court and undoubtedly had gag orders attached to them, and others probably were never filed. In other words, he would run around fondling people, and then if they complained, if they were too high profile to do this to, he would settle out of court and get a gag order. But if they were lower profile, he could just have the Black Room conduct slander campaigns against them or dig up dirt and say, you know what, if you talk to anybody about the way I molested you, then I'll release this information about you. Gee whiz. That's troubling, certainly, but it's not as, perhaps, as big picture troubling as the possibility that what this is really is saying here is his political enemies could be targeted too. And gee whiz, who are his political enemies? Well, they're Democrats for one thing, maybe Hillary Clinton, in fact, for another. In other words, what you could do over at Fox News, at least after 2011, and probably earlier, would be to use your private detectives to do opposition research on any political enemies you might choose, and then hand over what they find, or for that matter, even if they don't find anything, I guess you could charge the next chain next link in the chain, the PR guys, with the job of simply making stuff up. But if they had facts on the ground to back their allegations up, so much the better, they would be able to put out these press releases and conduct a negative PR campaign against someone that they hated. And then, and it's not entirely clear exactly under what name this PR stuff would go out. Would it go out as Fox stuff, or would it go out as a separate entity that didn't acknowledge its connection to Fox News? Because if it did, you just put those negative PR press releases out there, and one of them finds their way into the inbox of Fox News reporters, and then somebody sends word that, hey, Fox is going to pick up this story. So you put out negative PR on somebody that might not even be true. Then, gee whiz, Fox News starts reporting an exclusive. Look what we found. Look what our reporters dug up. Bad news about this or that Democrat. And Fox is reporting it. And then, of course, all the quote-unquote sister networks then say, oh, my God, Fox is onto something, and we can't let them have the exclusive. We got to pick this up, too. And then all of a sudden, basically whatever you want to be true about your political enemies becomes more or less true because it's being reported by all the major networks. We report, you decide whether or not the networks reporting are reporting something that is true or not. But they can generate their own news. I mean, they always could, but this way they can do it without fingerprints. And how interesting. And no wonder so many people who like Fox News and get their news from Fox News, one, are so mixed up and confused about what's real and what isn't, but how much they love Fox News and how loyal they are to Fox News and how much they trust Fox and don't trust anybody else. Not only does it confirm their biases by reporting from a biased standpoint, but it also was the only network that was ever capable, like Donald Trump in a way, of delivering them exactly what they hoped was true or wished someone would say was true while wearing a suit and sitting in front of a desk with one of those screens behind them so that they could videotape that and point that to people. Here's a YouTube of somebody who looks like they're on a real news organization saying this stuff. Plus, it's not something you never heard of. It's Fox, and everybody knows that the other networks are, bending over backwards to recognize their sister network as totally legitimate. That's what the operation was. We're just faking it and pretending it's news, and if you don't believe us because you think we're biased, well, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN now all saying the same thing because no one wants to be left out of the scoop. No one wants to let Fox have the exclusive on this. It's too hot, too juicy. So you just do it. I mean, that's really pretty goddamn amazing, to be honest. Imagine having that set up for yourself. So not only are the fans getting biased news, but if you, like I said, it's a little bit like Donald Trump, but you must be sitting at home in your Archie Bunker chair saying, God damn it, that Democrat, that guy, he, she, whoever it is, pisses me off. Why can't they just show that they're corrupt like I know that they are? Well, if the Fox viewers want to see it, fine. The PR division of Fox, which isn't Fox, it works out of the black room, generates that corruption story, plants it, it's out there, Fox picks it up, reports it, everybody else reports it, and now all of a sudden, all the networks are saying it, that person is officially corrupt, or at least some are saying that there are questions about whether or not that person is corrupt. And hallelujah, it's only Fox. Not only do they report the news the way it ought to be reported, but damn, if those enterprising reporters don't always find exactly that piece of news that I've been hungering for. God, I wish that was true. So they just make it true. And no other news organization can deliver that because it's not real. And you can't just do that. But they can. They go ahead and do it. And of course, people will remind you any number of opportunities that there are, that there's litigation out there, case law now that basically points to the proposition that it's not a particularly, not an interest to the criminal justice system, certainly, as to whether or not the news organizations knowingly lie. You're allowed to do it. Go for it. Nothing we can say about it. Consumers can choose not to believe you, but that's not happening because they've got a loyal constituency. So not only are they reporting news from a Republican standpoint, But they're making up the stuff that you crave to hear about others. And gosh, those other news organizations, here's the point about what I say about them being like Trump at heart. None of those other news organizations, to borrow the crass terminology of Trump supporters, have the balls to report this kind of stuff. Well, that's because it's not out there. It's not established. It doesn't meet journalistic standards for them to report. Even if they suspect it's true, all they can do is hint that it's true. Like, they can never call somebody a liar, or you can never definitively say this or that, or they gotta couch everything in allegedly terms, or it seems like, or it gives the appearance of. Fox can just say, we have evidence that it is XYZ. They've got the balls to report what everybody else is thinking is true. They dig into it and find out for us. Whether, I always wondered if it was true, and only Fox has the guts to go dig it out. Like Donald Trump he's the only one that has the guts to say what everybody's thinking. Fox is the one that has the guts to report what everybody's wishing for. And it turns out that there's no magic to it. They're just vertically integrated smear machine / news machine, or at least something that looks like one. That's all there is to it. This black room, to continue with the actual reporting here, was located on the 14th floor of the News Corp building at 1211 Avenue of the Americas, a quiet part of the office that housed Fox News Latino, interestingly enough, and some marketing and promotions employees. Fox employees Ken LaCourte and Jim Pinkerton, ironically enough, veteran political operatives who've worked with Ailes since the 1980s, also worked with Sullivan, the source said, adding that Ailes' personal lawyer and Fox contributor Peter Johnson Jr. advised the team. In an email, Johnson denied any involvement in Black Room campaigns, saying, the only online campaign I'm aware of is yours, attempting to create a truth from fiction with this account. Well, very much like Trump's lawyers, in fact. Targets of the campaign included journalists John Cook and Hamilton Nolan, who, this is very interesting too, have aggressively covered Ailes for Gawker. Golly gee whiz, whereas we have found Gawker at the center of some controversy in the last couple of months, haven't we? According to one source, private detectives followed Cook around his Brooklyn neighborhood, and Fox operatives prepared a report on him with information they intended to leak to blogs. According to the source, one proposed line of attack claimed that Cook, whose wife, who is Slate News director Allison Benedict, is Jewish. Well, one of the attacks then, as they point out, is obviously an anti-Semitic attack. I'm honored to be among Roger Ailes' enemies, Cook said. Fox operatives also targeted Joe Lindsley, the former editor of Ailes' local newspaper. Wow, the Putnam County News and Recorder. Okay. In April 2011, Lindsley had a falling out with Ailes and quit the paper along with 2 co-workers. Ailes assigned private investigators to follow Lindsley around Putnam County. He also asked Fox host Andrea Tantaros, whom Ailes had once seated next to Lindsley at a dinner party at Ailes' home, to contact Lindsley and report back on his whereabouts, 2 sources said. Weird. Meanwhile, Sullivan posted negative comments about Lindsley on blogs, a source said. I, the writer of our piece here, Gabriel Sherman, was also the target of an operation, a source told me. In 2012, while I was researching a biography of Ailes, Fox operatives set up web pages to attack my reputation, and Fox funds paid for Google search ads against my name that linked to the sites. One source also said private investigators employed by Fox contributor Bo Dietl, I don't even know who that is, Dietl, were instructed to follow me and my wife. Dietl's firm was used to track Andrea Macris, the producer who accused Bill O'Reilly of, yes, that's right, sexual harassment in 2004, the source said. Bill O'Reilly wanted to get in on the game and screwed it up. When reached by phone, Dietl said, I have no real comments. I love Roger Ailes. That's a comment in itself. He built one of the great news channels out of nothing, and it stayed out of nothing, too. He's a very successful guy. Think about that in Trump terms. The allegations about Ailes' questionable use of Fox resources raised the issue of how much other high-ranking officials knew about his activities. Fox News CFO Mark Kranz, for instance, approved budget expenditures throughout the period, and General Counsel Diane Brandy approved contracts. Through a spokesperson, both Kranz and Brandy said they had no knowledge of expenditures for surveillance and online attacks. Ailes, through his attorney Susan Estrich, get out of this, Susan, said these allegations are totally false. Meanwhile, Fox executives continue to analyze the list of consultants on Fox's payroll to determine who's doing legitimate work for the network and who was hired by Ailes to do his personal bidding. The senior source said that more people will likely be let go in the days ahead. Yes, that's probably true. And it'll be very interesting. And then, of course, another question is there a difference between his personal bidding and what the ownership would regard willingly as legitimate work for the network? I mean, consider who Rupert Murdoch is and what he has sanctioned in the past. A very, very interesting new turn in the Roger Ailes story, as if the sexual harassment angle wasn't bad enough. And if it wasn't bad enough for you, I mean, it's not bad for Republicans. They just don't care that their politics have been dictated for a quarter century by, a serial pervert. Because probably, what their response to that is. Well, Bill Clinton, blah, blah, blah. Of course, he hasn't been nearly as dominant in the direction of a quarter century of democratic politics as Roger Ailes has been, believe it or not. I guess that's an amazing commentary all by itself on the power of Roger Ailes. That from his perch at Fox News, he's been able to influence politics more deeply, not policy level politics, but superficial level politics, and that's enough in terms of deciding who gets elected to set policy. That's a very big deal, but more effective for a longer period of time than a president of the United States. That's pretty serious. And then, of course, there was the issue of, I guess Bill Clinton was maybe he's low energy. Maybe he just never had the ambition to set up a conveyor belt sexual harassment machine that would pay for the hotels and the fringe benefits and perks and other accoutrements that go along with a serial sexual harassment machine. But in addition to, I guess he did at least have his own intelligence operation, but that was the United States government. And I don't believe anybody has ever come around to accusing him of digging up dirt on people on the personal level, like local newspaper publishers either. But, then again, everybody thinks that they were rifling various files, et cetera, et cetera. But I assume that when you get to a certain level, there's any number of things on anybody that can be pointed to, and you can pretend that they had nefarious plans, and sometimes you're even right. But I don't know. I find this one particularly dark, particularly this sort of black ops PR operation that was very obviously, I think, vertically integrated into the news operation. I was reminded over the weekend, going back to all those people calling Fox a sister network when they were under attack. I wonder if we might get them to reconsider that. Probably not. Anyway, what's up next on the Metaphor Monday version of the After Show? Let's quickly find out if we still can fit it in. A new poll reveals a majority of Oklahomans want to replace the death penalty to life without parole, not patrol. But after less than a week of pressure by progressive groups, AARP will drop its dues-paying membership in the right-wing lobbying group, the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. That's right, and a little bit more coming up after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about this? A team of researchers find that a prehistoric skeleton unearthed in 1958 suggests the Europeans migrated to China 300,000 years ago. And for the last half, a visit with award-winning writer and teacher John Shirer on his new book, Making Common Sense Common Again. All of that coming up next on the After Show.